Okay, Thursday, the 9th of May, 2024. So 3 useful Bitcoin websites to move to a Bitcoin standard. So bitcointreasuries.net in the description below, pricedinbitcoin21.com, and the Louisiana Fed, the average price of eggs, or a dozen eggs in Bitcoin. So let's take one at a time. Bitcointreasuries.net shows us who has how many Bitcoin. And we can see that over time, as adoption increases, awareness and understanding increases, more companies and countries are going to put BTC on their balance sheet. And here is we can see, we can quantify the numbers. Here's the source. If you ever want one, it's here. We can see, or even the ETFs, so ETF, funds, ETFs, and similar. Perfect. And how many companies have it? MicroStrategy, Marathon, Tesla, Coinbase, Hunt8, Riot, Block Inc., CleanSpark, Galaxy Digital, Bitcoin Group, SE, and you name it. And even down to the bottom, governments. Apparently, the US government has 213,000. And even Bhutan has 621. Germany is 50,000. Finland has 90. Ooh, okay. What about private companies? Block One, Mt. Gox, KK, 141,000. Okay. Tether Holdings Limited, BitMEX, DeFi Smart Contract. Okay, that's another conversation. But here, we can see it. We can see the numbers exactly. Who has how many BTC? This shows us the general understanding and awareness of it. Because as the number of companies increases, and as the companies become more mainstream, more everyday companies that are unrelated to tech, in general, as that increases, that's awareness rising. That's adoption rising. Okay, interesting. That means that more people, ultimately, people, understand it and are putting it on the balance sheet and are, over time, in theory, over time, valuing their wealth in BTC, or certainly going long on it. They're going to hold it in the expectation in the future of selling it, but that means they are, lack of better words, bullish on the future. You wouldn't hold something unless you're going to expect better returns in the future. So this, as this list grows, that's more institutional adoption. We can quantify the institutional adoption. Very important. The second one, priced in Bitcoin 21, shows us different asset classes. US dollar, crude oil, gold, S&P 500, median new houses in the United States, priced in Bitcoin, and how, over the years, one Bitcoin ultimately buys you more of these things. Or these things need more Bitcoin to, or need fewer Bitcoin to buy this thing. Or what that also means is the price of Bitcoin goes up, it outcompetes the price of other things, everything else. So US dollar is down 90% on the 5-year chart, looking at the numbers here, against Bitcoin. Crude oil, 91%, gold, 91, S&P, 81, United States median new house, 85, over 5 years. So that means that everything gets cheaper on a Bitcoin standard, okay? So that means that as you value your wealth in Bitcoin, one Bitcoin and all the Satoshis, the 100 million Satoshis, buys more things over time. Because remember, Bitcoin, among other stuff, right, money you can own, money you can spend, apolitical, deflationary, decentralized with a fixed supply. Deflationary, increases in purchasing power over time. And here, we can quantify the numbers again in things getting cheaper over time. All kinds of different assets. Different assets, primary, whatever that is, primary assets, US dollar, crude oil, fiat, precious metals, commodities, equities, bond markets, houses, wages, you name it. Okay, now, this is a third-party website, and you could say it's biased towards Bitcoin because it's got Bitcoin in the name. Okay, but let's go one step further. Let's look at the Fed, the Louisiana Fed. Oh, so the Federal Reserve, or one of its branches. Very nice. And they have this beautiful chart here. Average prices. Eggs, grade A, large, cost per dozen in US city average, divided by Coinbase Bitcoin, multiplied by 1 million, 100 million. Okay, I understand now. Okay. So initially, it's got the past year or so, and you think, oh, it's up and then down. Like, what is that? But when in doubt, zoom out. And then you zoom out to the full timeline, and we're talking January 2015, okay? And the trend is what? It's down to the right. What does that mean? means the cost of eggs has collapsed in terms of Bitcoin. One whole Bitcoin buys you more dozen of eggs today than it did 5 years ago, or in this case, 9 years ago. Nine, and it really took off. What, January 2018? At that point, hit the inflection. It just crashed down to basically zero. But that right there is an admission by the Federal Reserve or one of its branches that one Bitcoin, when you look at the maths, one Bitcoin buys you more and more things. In this case, it's eggs. Fair enough. A staple food. Okay, fair enough. Proof of concept. That's what this is. You could say eggs, whatever, but it's the proof of concept. If, as an admission by the US Fed, Bitcoin has increased in purchasing power for eggs, but according to other website, priced in Bitcoin 21, it's all these other things as well, then it begs to reason what else in life has collapsed in purchasing power in terms of Bitcoin. Meaning your one Bitcoin buys you more and more things over time. And again, that makes sense. When in doubt, zoom out. Go back 14 years ago. What was one Bitcoin? What was that price in US dollars? What could that buy you? Okay, it could buy you X, it could buy you this. But now, one Bitcoin could buy you that, which makes sense. As the price of Bitcoin goes up, the number go technology is a bigger driver to go onto the Bitcoin standard. Why? Because it's deflationary. What does that mean? Things get cheaper over time. Now, then you could say, well, cheaper over time, being flippant now, who doesn't want that? Practically speaking, that's good. Things get cheaper. Things get cheaper and cheaper to buy. This is a great quote by Jeff Booth. I'm trying to remember it now. The cost of production collapses to its marginal price, which means everything ultimately, in terms of capitalism or entrepreneurship, productivity, through productivity, the price of everything goes to zero. Because businesses find more ways and more efficient ways of creating, building and supplying these products to the world. This is why computers, Moore's law, at least computers, have gotten cheaper over the decades. Have gotten better and cheaper and whatever else, smaller and lighter, you name it. Because innovation. This is why, in the 1950s, people would have struggled to have one colour TV or even one black and white TV. And yet fast forward today, there's 3 monitors here, there's another monitor elsewhere, and each of those are basically a TV. What does that say? And each of them are colour, full colour, and a lot smaller and lighter and cheaper than any television, even 20 years ago. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago? Yeah, I guess so. Quite likely, but 20 years ago plus, no questions asked. And that's the key thing there. When in doubt, zoom out. Things get cheaper on a Bitcoin standard over time. As you start valuing your wealth in Bitcoin, things get cheaper. But also, through entrepreneurship, things get better as well. But 2 separate things. Well, even those, I'm sure they're connected in some way. But that's another conversation altogether. Go on to a Bitcoin standard. Value your wealth in Bitcoin. That means, and the price fluctuation on a day-to-day basis, 60,000, 70,000 US dollars is irrelevant. Because if you're valuing everything in Bitcoin from start to finish in the production line, like even farmers growing and fertilizer and harvesting everything and paying wages and whatever else in Bitcoin, all the way to selling and getting it to market, even manufacturers, whatever. If you price everything in Bitcoin, the fiat price is irrelevant. But we do know, for entrepreneurship, everything gets cheaper. But also, even in the fiat world, as admitted by the US Fed, things get cheaper on a Bitcoin standard. In the words of Greg Foss, Greg Foss, it's all maths. And it is. Bitcoin is just maths. You can't change it, but it's open source. It's all just maths. And here is the repercussions of that maths and how it's affecting reality, how it's affecting the world. What that means for people and societies and cultures and you name it, things we can't even enumerate today or can't even imagine right now, which will be mainstream in 15 to 30 years from now, a Bitcoin standard. So yes, 3 good websites, bitcointreasuries.net, priced in Bitcoin 21 and the Louisiana Fed. This one especially, because this is an admission by the Federal Reserve that things get cheaper on a Bitcoin standard. And there's a chart right there. Average prices, eggs, grade A, large, cost per dozen in US city average. Okay, wow. And remember, when in doubt, zoom out. But otherwise, you will see me tomorrow.